My son didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his hand on the table. He didn't even look nervous. He just slid a thin stack of papers toward me and said, "I sold your house." I stared at him, waiting for the rest of the sentence. Maybe a joke, maybe an explanation. Instead, he continued, calm and precise, "To pay for a vacation, for me and my wife." Then he glanced at his watch and added, "You have 1 day to pack your things. 1 day. That's how much time he decided my entire life was worth. I felt something tighten in my chest, but no sound came out. I looked at my son, the boy I raised, the man who now sat across from me like a stranger, and instead of crying, I smiled, just a small smile, enough for him to notice. His face changed, just slightly. He thought that smile meant I had accepted defeat. He was wrong. Before I tell you how this moment ended, and why that smile mattered, stay with me. Because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when someone thinks you're powerless and doesn't realize how much strength quiet women carry. If stories about family betrayal, hidden strength, and hard-earned lessons matter to you, subscribe to Grandama Moments. I wasn't always an old woman with stiff fingers and slow steps. Once, I was a young wife who believed love could fix anything. My husband and I didn't have much, but we had plans. He worked long hours with his hands-honest work that left his palms rough and his back sore. Every night he came home exhausted, and every night he still smiled when he saw me. That house, my house, wasn't luxury. It wasn't big, but it was ours. We bought it with years of sacrifice. Skipped vacations, old furniture, meals stretched longer than they should have been. When our son was born, I remember standing in the doorway of his tiny bedroom, thinking, this is it. This is safety. That house heard my child's first cry. It held his first steps. It saw my husband leave every morning and come back every night until one morning he didn't. The phone call came on a Tuesday, no warning, no goodbye, just silence on the other end of the line, and words that split my life in half. After the funeral, people told me I was strong. They said, "At least you still have your son." I believed them. I raised my son alone after that. I worked extra shifts. I learned how to stretch money in ways that would surprise you. I learned which bills could wait and which ones couldn't. I learned how to smile even when my legs ached, and my heart felt heavier than my body could carry. I never told my son how scared I was. Children shouldn't carry their parents' fear. When he needed books, I found a way. When he needed shoes, I found overtime. When he wanted to dream, I made sure nothing stopped him. And when he grew older and told me he wanted to help take care of things, I felt proud. He said paperwork confused me now. He said finances were complicated. He said, "Let me handle it, Mom. You've done enough." I trusted him. That was my mistake at first. Nothing seemed wrong. He started coming over more often, carrying folders and documents. He talked fast, using words I didn't always understand. When I asked questions, he smiled and said, "It's normal, Mom. You don't need to worry." Sometimes I felt embarrassed for asking, so I stopped. That's how control begins, not with force, but with silence. He told me I was lucky to have such a responsible son. His wife nodded along, smiling politely, always checking her phone. They talked about travel a lot, beaches, resorts, cruises. I told myself it was normal. Young people dream big. I didn't realize I was paying for those dreams. The day he told me the house was sold, the sun was bright. I remember that clearly because it felt wrong. Betrayal should come with storms, shouldn't it? With thunder and dark skies. But no, that day was ordinary. He sat at my kitchen table, the same one where he used to do homework, the same one where his father once carved his initials underneath. "I already signed the papers," he said, tapping the stack in front of me. "You signed them too. You just didn't understand what you were signing." I felt cold. I asked him where I was supposed to go. He shrugged. "You'll figure something out." Just like that, years of motherhood reduced to an inconvenience. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I looked down at my hand that had cooked his meals, washed his clothes, held him when he cried. Then I looked back at him, and I smiled. That smile confused him more than anger ever could. He stood up quickly, uncomfortable now. "I'll send someone tomorrow to check the place," he said. "You should start packing tonight." Then he left, just walked out of the house. My house. After the door closed, I sat there for a long time. I didn't cry right away. I walked through each room, slowly, the hallway where my husband used to hang his coat, the bedroom where we whispered plans late at night, the kitchen where my son once spilled milk and cried like the world was ending. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let the tears come. But beneath the pain, something else stirred. Memory. A conversation from years ago, a warning I had almost forgotten. After my husband died, a lawyer had once sat across from me and said something strange. Never put everything in one name, he told me, especially when love is involved. At the time, I didn't fully understand, but I remembered the papers. I remembered the decisions made quietly, carefully. I remembered why I had smiled that night while my son celebrated his victory. I opened an old drawer. Inside were documents he had never seen. And for the first time since he spoke those words, "You have one day to pack." I felt calm, because the truth was something he never expected, and he was about to learn it. The drawer was old. It stuck a little when I pulled it open, as if it had something to say before revealing its contents. Inside were documents yellowed at the edges, folded neatly, untouched for years. My hands trembled not from fear, but from memory. I sat at the kitchen table again, the same place where my son had told me my life was over in one sentence. I spread the papers out slowly, one by one, as if I were laying down pieces of a story that had been waiting to be told. My husband had always been careful. People thought he was simple because he worked with his hands, but he understood something many people don't: how quickly love can turn into entitlement. After his brother lost everything to a greedy relative, my husband made a decision, quietly, without drama. "This is for you," he told me back then, sliding the papers toward me. "Just in case." At the time, I laughed. I told him we didn't need just in case. Now, years later, those words echoed differently. I didn't rush. That's important. People think strength looks like action phones ringing, lawyers shouting, doors slamming, but real strength is patience. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat by the window. I watched the streetlights come on one by one. My son thought I would panic, that I would call him, beg him, ask for mercy. Instead, I called the lawyer my husband had trusted. When he answered, there was a pause after I said my name. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you," he said gently. That was when I knew. The lawyer didn't sound surprised. When I told him what my son had done, he sighed. "Shouldn't have done that," he said. I asked him what would happen next. "Nothing," he replied, "because there is no valid sale." I closed my eyes. The house, the one my son claimed to own, was never fully his to sell. Not legally, not morally. Years ago, after my husband's death, ownership had been structured carefully. Shared interests, protective clauses, safeguards that only activate when someone tries to take what isn't theirs. The papers my son had me sign, incomplete without documents he never had. He thought my confusion was ignorance. It was single quotes. It was trust. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my son. His voice was sharp now, tight. "What did you do?" he demanded. I asked him what he meant. "The buyer pulled out," he snapped. "The bank froze everything." I let the silence stretch. "I don't understand," I said calmly. "I thought you sold the house." There it was, the first crack. He came over that afternoon. This time, he didn't sit. He paced the room, running his hands through his hair, talking too fast. "You embarrassed me," he said. "You made me look stupid." I looked at him and realized something painful. He wasn't angry because he'd hurt me. He was angry because he'd been exposed. I told him the truth. That the house wasn't his, that it never was, that his father had planned for this very possibility. His face was drained of color. "You tricked me," he said. "No," I replied quietly. "You tricked yourself." For the first time, my son looked small, not like a child, but like a man realizing the world doesn't bend just because he demands it to. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. There was nothing left to say. The vacation was canceled, the money never came, and the illusion of control he'd wrapped himself in fell apart in one afternoon. He didn't apologize. That hurt more than I expected. Instead, he said, "You didn't have to go this far." I watched him walk to the door. "You went far first," I said. He didn't turn around. That was the last time he entered my house. The days after were strangely peaceful. No calls, no visits, no noise. I cleaned the house slowly, deliberately. I opened windows. I let the light back in. People think justice is loud. Sometimes it's just silence where manipulation used to live. I replayed the years in my mind. Every time I ignored a question, every time I signed something without reading it fully, every time I told myself love meant surrender, I realized something painful but necessary. Love does not mean erasing yourself, and motherhood does not mean accepting betrayal. People ask if I forgave my son. I don't. No, forgiveness is complicated. But I stopped chasing him. I stopped explaining myself. And in doing that, I finally chose me. That smile I gave him that day, it wasn't a weakness, it was a memory, preparation, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing the truth, even when others underestimate you. If there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this: people who try to take from you often believe you're powerless. They mistake kindness for ignorance, silence for surrender, but wisdom doesn't shout, it waits. If this story felt familiar, if you've ever trusted someone who didn't deserve it, if you've ever been underestimated because of your age, your kindness, or your love, you are not alone. Subscribe to Grandama Moments. These are the stories of quiet strength, hard lessons, and the courage it takes to stand up even when your voice shakes. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is a smile and let the truth speak for itself.